to the next one, and while the stage is getting ready, I'll give you a hint. It's time to talk about NFTs. I know, you've been waiting for it. So, non-fungible tokens have really grown into a multi-billion-dollar industry. And investors are snapping out digital assets in art, in music, in sports, property, jewelry, you name it. So, here's to learn something new from people who actually deal with NFTs. And I'm happy to welcome on stage the next panel on NFTs paradigm shift to Metaverse in gaming. And I'd like to give the floor to Fernando Martinho. He's the CEO of Unicorn. You're here, Fernando. Please come on stage, and I'll let you introduce your amazing panelists. Yay!
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to call everyone to the stage. Sacha, Jafri, I don't think in his introduction, the amazing artist Jafri. Sacha, can you join us, please? Thank you. Also, Joel Dietz, ex-founder of Ethereum, MetaMask, you name it. Thank you, Joel. And Géraldine, please join us on stage. Géraldine has been in the art space for quite some time, you name it, Louvre, collectors of art. She's amazing, so thank you very much. Let's sit here. I would like each one of you, if you don't mind, just to tell us within 2 minutes, a bit about yourself and what you got really interested in all these new NFTs and Metaverse. Sacha, please.
Good morning. Okay. I guess I got a few things to say about this space. There's a few interesting things, and I've got a few sort of experiences on this journey. One is, what's really strange about the NFT and what's happening is that we're full of a generation that don't learn history, which puts us in a really vulnerable place in our future. When you don't study history, you have no understanding of the cycles and the things that have happened before and the things that have gone horribly wrong. And there are many examples of that. And it's the space is full of guys who are saying, I'm the first guy to do this, I'm the first guy to create an NFT where the owners are shareholders and it's a cooperative. I'm like, guys, this has been done by the Romans, by the cavemen, many times before. Tokenization, the Romans had tokens for salt. It was worth more than the coin, than money. So there's nothing new about tokenization. There's nothing new about the NFT. It's just a different name. And that's an important thing to understand and to remember. Otherwise, we connect the ego and we lose the essence of what we're actually trying to achieve. And that's what's happening, sadly. I think what then becomes interesting is the NFT space is full of, at the moment, an opportunity to make money. And what people aren't realizing is that artists are in a position of power like they've never been before. Looking back to the papal times of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, they had real power. But now again, for the first time since the papal artists, there is a huge power. And with this power comes a huge responsibility and a huge opportunity. And sadly, what we're seeing a lot in the space is creations of things that are tradable assets, rather than poignant, artistic, legacy-building creations. And it's filled, the space is filled with this. And people are able to buy, sell. And they're not that interested in what they're actually buying. It becomes a tradable asset. Okay, that's fine, because with that comes opportunity. If you look at the history of art, which is what we really should be looking at, the history of our existence and the history of art, that's where we're going to learn, that's where we're going to see the cycles, and that's where we're going to make a change. When we look at that, we see that interestingly, there is a big opportunity right now. Painters over history and the last 200 years, it's been controlled by 3 or 4 people. You had Sacha, Joplin, Gagosian, Christie, Sotheby's. And these guys got to a point where paintings were being put on the market, and these 5 entities were telling us, as human beings living on this planet, what was good, what was bad, what had value, what didn't, what was worth spending an obscene amount of money on, and what wasn't. But then it got even more ridiculous when they were telling us which collectors and which investors added value and which didn't. To the point where 2 people could bid $10 million for the same painting, but one guy's $10 million was worth more than the other guy's. And they were telling us this, and the entire art market was getting manipulated. And the most beautiful thing on our planet was being destroyed. Now, we're now in a position where we are blowing that apart. The power is back with the people, but we're getting flooded with a lot of nonsense, as often is the case. We're saying artists need a voice, they need a platform, and it's great, we're giving them a platform. But it's not great always, because you need to earn your platform. But then we have to learn from history and from our mistake, and we have to say, it's important that this space doesn't get the powers within it that are within the physical art world. The auction houses and the main dealers that control the entire thing and tell us what's good or bad, valuable or not. It's important that we let it play out. What we don't want is overly powerful regulators that tell us this is good and this has value, because then we're back where we were and we repeat the same mistakes. We need to let this play out. We need to let all the nonsense and the simplicity of basic tradable assets fall away, which it will. And then what you're left with is the poignant. You're left with things that make a difference on our planet. You're left with what art is about. And that becomes really interesting. And the NFT space has an opportunity to propel that, and to propel these beautiful creations to a point where poignancy will live beyond the tradable asset. That's what we should really be looking for. But we shouldn't be manipulating it and telling people what's good and what's not. We should let this play out. That's what decentralization is. And that's the opportunity we have. And I think it's really, really interesting. I think the final thing I'd say, sorry man, I'll be brief, is what's interesting is us as humans, we think that there's new things and we're obsessed with technology. There's nothing new under the sun or the stars. Nothing. It's all happened before. The only thing that's new is when human beings realize that they are powerful, living in a powerful world, but only when connected to what is good and right, when connected to our universe. That's when new things happen, when humanity connects to something greater than ourselves, to our universe, to universal consciousness. And that's when the human being creates magic. And that's when something new truly happens. Our future is not technology. Our future is human. Technology is there to aid humanity. And we have to remember that, and remember what humanity means. And with the NFT and real intention, we can actually help change our world. We can raise huge amounts of money, and we can make a difference in the charitable space. And I think that's what's interesting.
Yeah. Totally agree. We've had many chats about this. Absolutely, you know. I think it's very important for people to take from what a lot of us believe. It's the creator's economy. It's something that we really take quite personally, you know, and it's so important. But there's the other side as well, yeah, which is the technology and the collectors side of art. So, Géraldine, how do the collectors, not just art, you know, collectibles in general as well, I know you're very focused in the art space, but how do they see all this happening with decentralization and you know, maybe not going to the powerhouses, in the auction houses, and And NFT, Metaverse, in your opinion, because I know that you've been talking with a lot of them, how do they see all of this?
Okay, so I'm coming from the traditional art market. So the collectors I'm working with and for, most of them, I mean the old generation, they are traditional collectors. So for them, it's a little bit new. They have to be educated, and some of them are a little bit afraid of what's going on. But let's say the generation of between 40 and 60 years old, they are ready, they are listening, they are very curious, and they're ready to buy NFTs and jump into this new market. The young generation, it's a high opportunity for them. Very, very important opportunity, and it will boost the market, really.
Okay, that's great. And what about more the kind of the older generation, about 60 to 85, 90 maybe, It's quite hard to take them on that journey, right?
Yes, it's very hard. When I spoke to them recently, they are not comfortable with new technology, so we are really to educate them. I think when big sales will be public more and more, they will feel more comfortable, but we have to educate them. I have to be and stay with them and explain them step by step. They are more afraid about, let's say, crypto, because it goes with crypto, NFT. They are afraid about how to use that. They're not confident, not comfortable. So it's more this part. Also, they are very discreet. Most of the important sales are made in the private market. An item will go from a free port to another free port. So most of them also, they don't want that people know that it's sold something and at what price. So this is the most difficult thing, in fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's taken them through that journey. I'm sure there's a lot of people here as well that it's new for them, and it's the educational side, but it's also, that takes me to you, Joel, it's also the usability and make it easier for people, It doesn't matter how old you are, it's just about usability, and people feel comfortable to get there and click on a few buttons and, participate in an auction. I know that you are now in ArtWallet, right? How do you see this? I'm going to be honest, I haven't looked at it, I don't have time at the moment, but I'm quite excited that something is appearing that is going to help people, in the NFT, gaming, all of that integration. Tell us more about how you see the technology aspect of this. We've been talking.
I'll tell you a little story similar to Sacha. I'm a poet. My last book was of cat poetry, and I wrote it while I was sailing down the Nile from the south side north, and looking at these statues and temples and kind of connecting, the ancient history of this planet with, what's happening now. And when I explain the metaverse to people, I like to say there's sort of three different tracks. There's the AR, VR, et cetera, technology that's being developed. There is the blockchain digital asset, and then there is the knowledge of our own brain chemistry and how we can shift it and perceive things that go beyond what our visual cortex can normally absorb. Most people are visual, they take in information visually, but there are various mechanisms that we found to kind of shift that auditory input, other types of sensory input. And sometimes that relates to something that's very visceral and approachable that you get. Like I have friends, for example, who are scent designers, and they design the scents when you walk into a movie and you smell popcorn. That's the scent that they design. So, and we live here in a culture that has some kind of other type of sensory input. And so going back to my own personal history, particularly in the blockchain space, when I had the idea to create MetaMask, it was basically saying, where people are today is in the web browser. So they're not going to necessarily first appear, experiencing by all these downloadable clients. They're going to experience it in the web browser. And ArtWallet is kind of taking it to the next level, saying what is the most streamlined, visceral, easy to appreciate experience that takes it. And in some ways that's a process. It's almost a mental framework rather than a product at the very initial thing, because there are so many. We're seeing NFTs grow from being, a JPEG to, and I could tell you, hundreds of different things that people are doing in the Metaverse today that would just totally blow your mind, as well as the future of kind of other type of digital asset management. And being the gateway and kind of layer that like takes people into that and gives them the framework for doing it, like is just one of the most incredible things to be involved with. And in some ways it's the layer, not just of the wallet there. I mean, we're in a kind of blockchain space, but thankfully we're full of artists and art and things of that nature, but it's the layer that connects us to all of the unseen world. And just think about it for a second. There's a whole unseen world that often we don't have access to, at least with any kind of precision. And now we're building effectively this layer, partially technologically, partially, physical products and phones and things like that, and partially, going into our own knowledge and neuroscience also of our own brain chemistry. And so as those worlds start to merge, that amount of creative potential that is going to be released on this planet is just going to be mind-boggling. And kind of sort of Sacha said, you have other things that in the past, there's things that are similar, but one of the things that might differ from him about an approach is that we're almost getting something where basically any person in Australia and Indonesia and really any part of the planet can instantly connect with any other person, create a project together, fund the project, sell it, continue to develop, and it can be in a whole nother virtual world. They can be building, their own version of automobiles, or soon to be people will be literally designing flying cars in the metaverse, and then they will pop out in a factory in a different part of the world. That's not that far away. That's, maybe a decade. So, but we're gonna get there, and there's a fair bit of technological infrastructure that needs to be built to take us all the way there. But that's where the world is going, and that's why people like me are like so excited about the metaverse.
Yeah, fantastic. Me too. We talk about this. It's amazing. So that takes me to the NFT. When we talk about metaverse, I see a lot of people using that word in many different ways, which is wrong. I can't recall now the name of the book that was coined with the term metaverse. It was 90s.
No Crash.
Yes, yeah, correct. So, I'm sorry, I'm very tired. The most important aspect for me, and I want to have your opinion, the three of you on that, is that it's that connection between real world, real items, your daily lives, and actually a virtual world, and but it happens the other way around as well, which is the virtual world, and bringing back that interaction with the real life. So I've seen some cool projects that start like that, and they bring it back to the real life. So what do you think is going to be the impact, real impact, and when? Because you talk about infrastructure, We had VR experiments 10 years ago, I know technology has evolved, right? But that digitalization, so this is something that in my platform we do, you guys know, that real art, real collectibles, we digitize them and we make them available for whoever wants to buy, to take both the physical and the digital version. But the impact on people's lives, and where, this is what I would like really to know, in your opinion.
Okay, is that me?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, that's everything I'm about, so I have a long answer, but I'll give you the short answer. Okay, you talk about impact on people's lives. Humanity is two things only: love and empathy. That's it. We overcomplicate it, we make it about things it's not, we make it about things we don't understand. It's about two words: love and empathy. We often don't understand what those words mean or the power of those words. Art is about two things: love and empathy. That's it. When the two combine, something incredibly powerful happens. Something that creates impact. But how does that combine in a poignant way that can last forever? Well, if you understand that we are made of energy, when we communicate at our most poignant, we are merely transmitting, absorbing, emitting energy. But our energy is made of our intentions. And leading up to COVID, when was it? The end of 2019, beginning of 2020, I felt that there was an enormous amount of static everywhere I went. There was static. When there's static between us, we can't communicate because we're made of energy. And energy can't communicate through static. So at that moment, there's a really big problem. And then COVID-19 came. And obviously, it's a tragic thing where a lot of people lost their lives and families were torn apart. But also it was an opportunity. And I felt a silence because the static, for the first time in I don't even know how long, left our world. It didn't leave a country, a city, a continent, it left our world. And there was a silence, a beautiful silence. And at that moment, ironically, we started to connect again. And I knew that window was short and it would close, but I knew that there was an opportunity to tap into something that could create impact with art and humanity. And I embarked on a journey, a painting that became huge and did something beautiful in the world. But sadly, that static is filling our world again so quickly at hyperspeed. And particularly in this space. I'm sure you all feel it. There's static everywhere because our energy is made of our intentions. And if our intentions become questionable, full of agenda, manipulation, lies, what can I get from you? How do I get here quickly? How do I make money? That becomes your intention, that becomes the energy that you emit, you create static. That's a problem. So, the answer of how we get rid of that and how we create poignancy and how we create a legacy that means something becomes interesting. And I decided to do something a little bit naive. I'm doing a collaboration with one of the sort of most, I would say, influential digital artists. I am a physical artist only. I'm organic, I believe in energy, I believe in intentions. And I decided to connect with a digital artist called Pac. Now, no one really knows who Pac is, but Pac has influence and power within this space. And it's been said that Pac, in reality, is 30 people in a basement somewhere that no one knows where they are, tapped into supercomputers, and they've been around 150 years. And they've been involved in everything. Manipulating everything, following everything, tracking everything, and it's fascinating. So I get to speak to Pac, and only 3 people in the world have ever spoken to Pac. But when you speak to Pac, it's some VPN, some weird number, there's no, obviously, mobile, it's all very strange. And I come from a very non-digital, non-technical world. And so I'm speaking, and there's this like voice changer, and it's a very high-pitched, weird, sort of cartoon voice. And I'm like, man, how on earth are we going to create something together? How on earth does this work, you know? And I'm looking at what Pac does, and I'm like, you know, it's a whole load of very self-important, digitalized nonsense. That's what I'm thinking. And then as I'm speaking for hours and hours, I'm like, actually, this is really interesting. Because Pac is obsessed with technology. And Pac keeps saying to me, yeah, but I want to create something no one's ever seen in the technical space, and I want to create blockchain configuration that people have never seen, that has layers and layers and layers, that becomes integrated within our community, etc. And I'm like, okay, I want to create intention. And he's like, what do you mean? How does that work? Oh, I don't understand. And literally, he didn't understand me, I didn't understand him. And then I thought, well, this is actually suddenly a really interesting opportunity, because if we keep our integrity and we stay who we are, and I say I'm not buying into any of that nonsense, and he says I don't understand what you're talking about, but somehow we're going to connect and we're going to create a work of art that becomes an NFT together. And When that happens, it's going to be really interesting because it's someone obsessed with technology and someone who sort of completely rejects technology and wants to get back to our essence. Because I believe that when you strip back the essence completely, and when you get back to that pure essence of who we are, there's this beautiful moment where we realize we are so far away from our essence. Our essence can be reminded to us by, if we put a picture of ourselves, our 4-year-old self, on the wall, and we look at ourselves, and we're full of guilt and regret and all these things that make up our psyche and fear. If we put that child up and we look at that child and we say, that is who I owe everything to. That's who I owe my life to. A moment happens with us where we see our essence, where we see our soul, and we realize how far away we are from that. And then we realize that if we reconnect to our child, our essence, something beautiful and meaningful can happen, which is made only of intention. And that's when I explained to Pac. Pac said, yeah, but I want to do something no one's ever done. And I'm like, forget that. Everything's been done. Under the stars and the sun, everything's been done. 3 people can do a brushstroke exactly the same. But the intentions with which that stroke is made create something different. And that's what the technical world don't fully understand. And then you think, okay, physical artists, it's very obvious, intentions, you can see it in the brushstroke. But how does that come across in the digital world? Well, actually it does. It's a lot of guys that I'm beginning to meet in this space have really beautiful intentions.
And that's the impact.
Yeah, and that's how the impact's going to happen. But I think conversation is important, and a combination of 2 very different ways of looking at our world. When those 2 things combine, something really interesting is going to happen. The physical artist can't do it on his own anymore. The digital artist cannot do it on his own. But when the 2 combine, that's when something really fascinating is going to happen.
Great. Fascinating, you know, and there's always the other side of the impact as well, yeah? So Joe, fascinating, you know, I always like when when Sacha starts to talk, it's amazing. Tell us, following what he said, you know, from your perspective, that impact, you know, from a technological side, yeah? How far are we, and how big is that impact going to have, you know? Depends really on the technology, isn't it? How we create that infrastructure as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of things missing, I would say, you know, and it was kind of, when I came into the NFT space, I was like, oh, very cool, but, you know, then I did a survey. I mean, obviously I was aware, I have an agency that represents a lot of celebrities, like we did the Mike Tyson drop, which I think broke some, you know, OpenSea records, I think 17 million on kind of an open ring weekend. And you know, a bunch of other things that have been quite successful so far. But I was still looking at all the marketplaces and this, that, and the other, and I was like, there's a lot of stuff that's missing, you know, really, for this to be sustainable, for this to be, you know, artwork that's still around in 10 or 20 years, for it to actually retain value, to be opening up some of the larger institutional investment, to have insurance behind the assets, to make them bankable. And so our sort of whole approach to that has actually really been to go through very systematically of all the infrastructure and features that would be necessary. And then, you know, sometimes it's something that we can build ourselves from a technological standpoint. Like one of the core technologies we're building is audio-visual streaming and exclusive content behind NFTs. That's just being launched today because here we have some of these crypto Apollo NFTs. It's the first 111 are being dropped at NFT Basel. And then one of them, you know, including with some of the ones that are happening in the ArtWallet, TGP, are basically going to win this NFT wrapped car, which is actually pulling up here just at this moment. So in some ways it's a bridge, you know, similar to what we talked about with flying cars, between the metaverse in this sort of early stage and then the real physical objects. And so I think it's just in general, the more that those bridges can be built, the more accountability there is as well behind people who are doing these things, and the more sort of reliability. Like I'm also a fellow at MIT, I'm putting out a book on crypto economics, I have kind of a lot of things, and I did the first academic work on crypto economics as well. And you know, there's just a need in some ways to really clarify in this industry, you know, what are the sort of legitimate things and have a rubric. And I've talked with multiple people in the last couple of days about it, and it's amazing how many people in this space and not have a sense of what is a positive impact on society, or is the technology, that they don't have a way of judging whether it's really creating a positive impact.
Yeah.
And so I think there's just a need for really just a philosophical interpretation of being able to say very clearly, besides, you know, some kind of vague stuff about human freedom, like what are we doing that is really producing a concrete and positive impact?
Great. We have to wrap up. I think we have a minute or two. So one of I think it's quite important is to take the collector side. You know, it's based on what they already said. Yeah, my question. You know, what is that single thing that you think is going to be quite hard in the journey from these traditional collectors? You know, the impact that it will have on them, you know, what we are doing. This for me is fascinating to understand, you know.
The most difficult thing is to convince them. But as I told you already, the technology, they don't know about the threat. So it's really a question of education, educating. When they will have more and more examples of sales, public sales, or for instance, what happened this summer, the Museum of Hermitage and the Uffizi galleries, they started to sell NFT of their paintings in the museum. Yeah? And one of the painting of the Uffizi was sold, NFT, representing a Michelangelo, was $170,000. So these type of examples will show them that it's real and it's serious. So this kind of example.
Yeah. So it's the credibility of the space and the technology side that makes it easy for them to enter, because all the rest, yeah, you know, you guys just do the brush with your feelings, you know.
That's it. We gotta let it play out. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And the good stuff will come through.
Absolutely. So thank you. Please join me to applaud. It's amazing people. Thank you so much, guys.